Welcome back to today's video. In today's video, we're going to take a look at a Joe Biden versus Donald Trump rematch. As again, in today's video, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and like the video. It's really helpful if you're able to subscribe and like the video. Let's go into today's video. Taking a look here at our electoral map, let's go ahead and start filling out several of the states along the east and western coasts of our electoral map. Just filling out several of these states that are going to be extremely important in our electoral map. Filling out several of the plain states here, and then we'll go ahead and look at several of the likely states. We'll follow this up with several of the likely states for either candidate. The state of Alaska, Texas, and Florida will be likely for either candidate. And for Joe Biden, he will end up winning the state of Hawaii, along with Colorado as being likely, the state of New Mexico as being likely. New York is safe. New Hampshire will be likely. Vermont, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, D.C., Rhode Island, and Maryland. Donald Trump will win South Carolina's 9 electoral votes as being safe. Indiana will win. Indiana will go to the former president. Illinois will be safe for President Biden. Also, the state of Ohio will be likely for the former president, along with Alabama as being safe. Utah will also be safe. Trump will win almost all the congressional districts in the state of Nebraska as being safe. And also, Joe Biden will win several of the congressional districts in the state of Maine. Now, that being said, we have Joe Biden here at 202 electoral votes and Donald Trump at 218 electoral votes. Now, let's take a look here at several of these particular swing states and these swing districts. Let's start with the polling data here in the state of Wisconsin and kind of work our way here through the polling data. Now we are using RCP average. RCP I do find is more accurate compared to 538. When you go back to the 2020 election, you could see that based off of the majority of the polling data, RCP was much more accurate in predicting the election. It was not accurate in terms of the actual result. RCP was not accurate. All that being said, it was more accurate than other news networks. Trump is currently ahead by 2%, and you are seeing that Trump and Biden were almost neck and neck. Trump was around 0.5 to 1% ahead of Joe Biden, although now it's gone up to approximately 2% due to some recent polling data. Now, what exactly does this mean for the state of Wisconsin? Well, when you look at the previous polling data, specifically in the 2020 election, you could see that Joe Biden was actually leading Trump by 6.9%, around that margin, in the RCP 538 polling aggregate. I'm not sure which one exactly, but in one of the polling aggregates, you could see that the final aggregate was around 6.9%. Although in the actual election, Joe Biden ended up leading by only 0.9%, which means that the polling data in the state of Wisconsin in 2020 ended up overestimating then former Vice President Biden by approximately 6%, which means that if you were to add that 6% onto the current polling data that we have right now, Trump would be leading in the state of Wisconsin by 8%. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and look at that scenario. That is a scenario that some individuals have looked at when you take the 2020 polling data error and applying that to the 2024 election, you get some very interesting results in terms of the margins that Joe Biden could end up losing to Donald Trump. Although I will not do that for the purpose of today's video, but that is a scenario to kind of think about. In the state of Michigan, Trump's leading by 3%. You do see that in a recent poll, Biden was leading by around 2%, although in the majority of the polls, Trump is leading. It has been going around steadily since mid-April, approximately has been going on steadily. Trump was leading by bigger margins previously. For example, if you go back to January, Trump really reached his peak at around January, December. He was at around 5% and very high in many of the polls, although recently it's been going at around 3% in the state of Michigan. In the state of Pennsylvania, this is a state which is good news for Joe Biden. Joe Biden's leading by 0.4%. When you look at the most of the polling data, you do see that Trump and Biden have been going really back and forth with this. Although, for the most part, at least recently, Biden has been taking a small lead over the former president. Now, when you go back to around January, you do see that Trump was really at a good point. He was around 1 to 2%, 1 to 1.5% above Joe Biden. Although more recently, Joe Biden has been having a small lead over the former president. Let's go ahead and take a look at the state of Georgia now. The state of Georgia is a state which I believe that the Trump campaign does have in the bag in terms of winning the election. He has been leading in this state by large margins for quite some time. In fact, at one point, he was leading by around 7 points, although that has diminished to around 4.2%, although it is still a good margin for the former president. Now, just taking a look at this here, I have thought about this. If you give Trump here the state of Georgia, and let's take a look at the state of North Carolina, because North Carolina is a state which is a swing state. People kind of forget that, but North Carolina is still a swing state. Trump's leading by 4.8%. he has been leading. Again, he was leading by bigger margins by around 6% in January, December. January, December was really when Trump reached his peak, although now it's still at a pretty good margin, around 4.2%. When you include North Carolina into this, which Trump is most likely going to win as a tilt state, right? And you give Trump also the state of Georgia, which he's going to win by a tilt margin, or even by a bigger margin, maybe even by a lean margin. You do see that Trump's at 250 electoral votes. Now, after the 250 electoral votes, you give Trump Maine's second congressional district, which he won in both 2016 and 2020. You give him that one congressional district. Okay, you give him that one congressional district, followed by the state of Pennsylvania. Trump's already at 270. Even if Trump doesn't win Maine's second congressional district, he'll reach 269, in which case it would go to the House of Representatives. So you do see that scenario where Trump really doesn't have to win anything other than Pennsylvania and Maine and keep this and win the state of Georgia as well in order to win the election. So that is an interesting scenario to look at. Although the state of Pennsylvania is a crucial state for that particular reason, if Biden loses the state of Pennsylvania, his general election chances are over at that point. At that point, because assuming Trump wins Georgia and North Carolina, which at this point most people are beginning to recognize that there's almost no way Biden can win Georgia. I mean, it is a possibility, but it's a very slim possibility. If Trump wins Georgia and he keeps North Carolina, and Biden loses Pennsylvania, it's over for Biden. So Biden, it's good news for Biden that he's leading in the state of Pennsylvania, but he definitely wants to increase that margin, try to get it up to maybe around 2 to 3%, and that'll be much better for him. But again, the polling data has been quite tight, and I do think that Biden couldn't possibly expand his lead in the lead up to the election. In the state of Georgia, Trump is leading obviously by 4%. We already looked at that. Now let's move on to the state of Arizona. Now, Arizona is interesting. Currently, Trump is leading by a larger margin in Arizona than he's leading in Georgia, which some people put Arizona as a state which Joe Biden could win. I honestly don't think that. I think that people are overestimating how much support Biden has in that particular state. You have to remember Arizona is very close to the border, which obviously is not a good news for Joe Biden. Joe Biden only ended up winning in the state of Arizona by around 0.3%, an extremely small margin for him to win, obviously, in that particular state. And his favorability in that state has obviously gone down since the 2020 election, and he's way behind in the polls compared to the former president. So I think people are overestimating Arizona going to Biden. I don't think it's going to go to Biden. I think that Trump's going to win in the state of Arizona. I think he's going to win in the state of Georgia, and I also think he's going to win in the state of North Carolina. Now, this is the interesting thing. If Trump wins in North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona, which I think he's highly likely to win, I don't know how likely he is to win in Pennsylvania. I think he's more likely to win in Arizona and Georgia than to win in Pennsylvania. I think he's more likely to win in Arizona than Pennsylvania. But even if Trump wins Arizona, yet he recognized Trump's at 261, which does not make him win the presidency. And another state which is crucial is the state of Nevada. The state of Nevada, Trump's leading by 4.8%, which is a really good margin for him. Compared to the state of Georgia, Trump's leading in the state of Nevada, which, by the way, the state of Georgia has not voted Democrat. Um, if you exclude 2020, the state of Georgia has not voted Democrat, I believe, since 1980 when Jimmy Carter was running against Ronald Reagan, if you exclude 2020. Although the state of Nevada has voted consistently Democrat since 2004 when John Kerry was able to in that state. So the fact that Trump's leading by a bigger margin in the state of Nevada compared to Georgia is very interesting. Also, Joe Biden won the state of Nevada by a bigger margin in 2020 compared to the state of Arizona in the 2020 election. Biden ended up leading the state of Nevada by 2.4%, approximately that. And in the state of Arizona, she ended up winning in 2020 by around 0.6, somewhere around less than 0.7, 0.7%, around that margin. So it is very interesting that Trump is leading by a bigger margin in the state of Nevada when you factor all those in. But yeah, so Trump's leading obviously in the state of Nevada. But even when you give the state of Nevada, this is very interesting. Trump could win Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina. He can win the entire Sun Belt, and he could be at 267. 267 is not enough. It won't even go to the House of Representatives. Now, you might be saying, okay, he can win Maine second congressional district. Although that being said, he would still need to win Nebraska's second congressional district, which he lost by approximately 6% in the 2020 election against Joe Biden. Now, the district has been obviously gerrymandered over the course of since the 2020 census, and Republicans obviously have control in the state of Nebraska. It has been gerrymandered, and because of that, it is including some more rural regions. So due to the fact that it is including some more rural regions tend to vote more for the former president. So some individuals say that Trump could end up winning in Nebraska's second congressional district, although there is a big possibility that Joe Biden can end up winning in that second congressional district, which is why the state of Pennsylvania is such a crucial state. And it's very important that Joe Biden holds on to that state, because currently Joe Biden is losing the election, and he really needs to hold on to that key coalition, which really gave Joe Biden the election last time around. So really, you got to consider this. If Joe Biden can hold on to the state of Pennsylvania in the 2020 election, and he holds on to the state of Minnesota, which he won last time around, he holds on to the state of Virginia, which he also won last time around, and basically what that puts him at 244 against Trump's 268. Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia are not going to Joe Biden. Okay, they're not going to go to Joe Biden. Now, Nevada, you could debate, obviously, and even Arizona, you could debate, and Georgia as well. I guess you could debate, but Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia, they're not going to go to Joe Biden. So Joe Biden definitely needs Pennsylvania's 19 electoral votes. Then you got Wisconsin and Michigan. He has to win in Wisconsin and Michigan. And when we look at most of the polling data here, Trump's ahead by 2% in the state of Wisconsin. And when you look at the state of Michigan here, in the state of Michigan, Trump's leading by 3%. So 3% in the state of Michigan. So that is not good news whatsoever for Joe Biden. Trump's leading by 2% and 3% respectively. It's going to be very difficult for him to win those two states. Yet, even if he wins those two states, that puts him at 269. And in that scenario, he would have to win Nebraska's second congressional district, which is why Nebraska's second congressional district is so crucial to either candidates. Recently, Republicans have been trying to actually make Nebraska's second congressional district be a part of the entire state, meaning the Nebraska second congressional district would be a part of all of the electoral votes in the state of Nebraska. In that particular scenario, Donald Trump would win all 5 of the electoral votes in the state of Nebraska. Now, that has not gone to fruition in the state of Nebraska, although this just goes to show you, because if Biden wins Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, holds on to Virginia and Minnesota, the state of Nebraska's second congressional district will be a game changer, because if Trump wins Nebraska's second congressional district, it immediately goes to the House of Representatives. If it goes to the House of Representatives, most likely Republicans are in control, or they probably will be in control even in 2024, and that will basically shift the election to Donald Trump, assuming the Republicans maintain control, and they're already in control already. And most of the time, whenever an incumbent president is going for re-election, the House of Representatives stays in the same party that is opposite their own party. But Nebraska's second congressional district, if Trump wins, it immediately goes to 269, 269. If Biden wins, on the other hand, Nebraska's second congressional district, and holds on to the entire Rust Belt, that gives him the election. It doesn't even go to the House of Representatives. It's over. That is why that's extremely crucial for Joe Biden's reelection, that he wins those. But right now, current polling data shows that Trump's leading in Wisconsin. It also shows that he's leading in Michigan, and that is basically where we're at in terms of that. Now, for Nebraska's second congressional district, I do believe that Trump's going to win in that congressional district. I do believe that due to gerrymandering, Trump will end up winning in that congressional district, and the district has been gotten much bigger. But I just want to touch on the state of Minnesota and Virginia, because people are not talking about that state, and I think people need to really be talking about that. Joe Biden's only leading in the state of Minnesota by 2.3%. He ended up leading in the 2020 election, winning that state by around 7%. He's only leading by 2.3%. That means Biden is leading in the state of Minnesota, which has not voted Republican, I believe, in over 50 years. It has not voted Republican in the last 50 to 45 years. It has not voted Republican. Joe Biden's only leading by 2.3%. Just to put this in context, Joe Biden is almost leading Trump in the state of Minnesota by almost the same margin that Trump is leading Biden in the state of Wisconsin. Okay. Now, that being said, I would like to say that Wisconsin polling has been going relatively tight. Not It's been going around 1%, relatively tight for quite some time, and they have been tied as well for quite some time. Although all the Minnesota polling, when you look at most of the Minnesota polling, uh, when you look at most of the Minnesota polling, it's been basically Biden ahead by 2.3%. So I don't think that number is going to really change that much. Although Wisconsin polling tends to shift back and forth between Biden and Trump, but it just goes to show you that Minnesota is very much alive as a swing state. Biden's only leading by 2.3%. In the state of Virginia, Biden's leading by 4.3%. Again, to put this in context, Trump's leading in the state of Nevada by a larger margin than Joe Biden is leading in the state of Virginia. Again, the last time Virginia voted Republican was in 2004. That is very similar, actually, to the state of Nevada. The last time Nevada has voted Democrat, though, has been since 2004. Now, that's actually a disadvantage for Joe Biden. That's actually harder for Trump to win, technically, since it has not voted Republican for quite some time, although Virginia has voted Democrat consecutively since Joe Biden became when Joe Biden became vice president, rather, in 2008. But they're very, I want to say that Virginia and Minnesota are very much alive as swing states, and I don't think people talk about that enough. It definitely is something we should really be talking about more, and it definitely is a state which the Biden campaign needs to be spending more money in, more time in. I mean, not really more time in. They should be spending more time in Wisconsin and Michigan, but they definitely should keep that in their radar. For the general election polling data, now this is very interesting. General election polling data by RCP. Taking a look at this, it has been showing Trump ahead for quite some time. In fact, the last time Biden was ahead was by like around he was ahead by a substantial margin, was like in August almost. It's been going back and forth in about October, September. Although Trump has been having relatively large leads, at one point I believe he was around like 4.3% ahead of Biden. Although recently Trump's only had by 0.3%. If this trend continues, you could see Biden leading in the RCP aggregate by the time the 2024 election happens. So you could end up seeing Biden actually winning the popular vote, yet Trump beating Biden in the electoral college in terms of that. Now, when you go back to the 2024 election, just to see how accurate general election polling data is, Biden led in most of the polling data by 7.2% in most of the polling data up to the election, whereas he ended up only winning by around 4.5% in the actual election. So the polling data in that scenario was off by around 3% in favor of Trump in that scenario. If it's uh, in favor of Trump by 3%, that would mean Trump's leading by 3.3%, although nevertheless, it is still something to consider. So that is for that. Although I do want to take a look at another factor, just taking a look at this really quickly. We do have some polling data for Trump versus Biden versus Kennedy. Now, taking a look at this here. Now, the polling data is kind of contradictory, so I don't want to bring too much of the actual logistics of this. But just taking a look at this, when you look at Trump versus Biden polling data, you see Trump's leading Biden in the general election by 0.3%. Whereas when you include Kennedy in the polling data, Trump's leading by 5.3%. Okay. So when you look at that, you're thinking, wow, Kennedy gives Trump a 5% advantage compared to if he was just going against Biden. But I also look at polling data when you include Stein and West. And when you include Stein and West, Jill Stein, who's running in the Green Party, and Cornel West, who's basically running as, I believe, a socialist. I believe he's a self identified, he's a very liberal individual. Trump ends up leading by only 0.9%. Okay. Now that maybe you might be thinking that doesn't really make sense, right? If you're thinking Trump is okay, you're thinking about this. RFK is seen as more conservative than Jill Stein and Cornel West. Okay, at least in terms of perception, right? He's seen as more conservative than Jill Stein and Cornel West. Therefore, Kennedy, sorry, Kennedy should be helping Trump more than Jill Stein is helping Trump, right? But when you look at the actual polling data, you do see that Trump actually drops when you include Kennedy, West, and Stein. Okay, where on the other hand, you should see Trump actually increasing if you include West and Stein, considering that West and Stein would be taking more votes away from Biden, making Trump's lead to grow larger than 5.3%. But Trump's only leading by 0.9%, which, by the way, is still higher than his 0.3%. So I don't want to bring too much of that in because the polls do seem very contradictory. Sometimes polls do seem contradictory in some respects, although it is very interesting that RCP currently has Trump doing worse when you include West and Stein compared to if he's just going directly against Kennedy. So I do find that very interesting. Just wanted to point that out to you guys. But this is a prediction for right now based off of polling data. I haven't really looked at polling data though for the state of Nebraska, second congressional district, and Maine, second congressional district. But that is something that we should look at. But if you like this video, guys, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and like the video. Make sure you obviously are watching the videos as they're coming along. I did not post last week, so I do apologize for that. But I will be posting next week, hopefully, and that will be coming around next week. And I'll see you guys next time.